Most people know this story because of a movie. A man sits in a dark cabin, talking quietly about sharks. He says the name of a ship, USS Indianapolis, and suddenly, a summer blockbuster becomes something else.
So, but that's the USS Indianapolis.
You were on the Indianapolis?
In 5 nights, the survivors waited in the open ocean. Some were burned, some were bleeding, some began drinking seawater, some began seeing islands that were not there. So what actually happened to the USS Indianapolis? In July 1945, the USS Indianapolis had already seen battle. She had survived a kamikaze attack near Okinawa, and by the summer of 1945, she was given one of the most secret missions of the Second World War. The crew did not know the full truth. Most of them were just told they were carrying important cargo, but that cargo included parts for the atomic bomb that would later be dropped on Hiroshima. The ship raced across the Pacific. Radio silence and no explanation to the men on board. On July 26, 1945, the Indianapolis delivered the cargo on the island of Tinian. The mission was complete. The secret had been carried across the ocean, and for a moment, the worst part of the story seemed to be over. But it was not. It was only the beginning. After delivering the most dangerous cargo in the world, the ship sailed away almost unprotected. No escort, no submarine hunting equipment, and no clear warning that Japanese submarines might be in her path. Just after midnight on July 30th, the USS Indianapolis was moving through the Philippine Sea. The water was calm. The moon was bright enough for a submarine commander to see her shape. That submarine was Japanese Worth 58, commanded by Mochitsura Hashimoto. He ordered torpedoes fired. 2 of them hit. The first ripped into the bow. The second struck near the middle of the ship. In moments, the Indianapolis was dying. Men were thrown from bunks. Steam burned through compartments. Oil spread across the deck and into the sea. Some sailors never made it out. Others climbed through smoke and darkness without knowing which way was up. The ship began to tilt. Then it rolled. Then it went down. 12 minutes. That was all. Around 900 men made it into the water. Many had no lifeboats. Some had life jackets. Some had only pieces of wreckage. And all around them was black ocean. At first, survival meant staying together. Hold on. Stay awake. Don't drift away. But the men did not know the most frightening part yet. No one was looking for them. When a ship sinks in a movie, the rescue usually begins right away. Planes take off, ships turn around, someone sends a message. But this was not a movie. The men in the water expected help. They believed the Navy would notice. They believed someone would come, so they waited. But this was not an ordinary ship on an ordinary route. The Indianapolis had just finished a mission so secret that most of the crew had not even known what they were carrying. And now, in the middle of the Pacific, that secrecy seemed to wrap around them like the ocean itself. The first morning came, then the sun rose higher. There was no shade. Salt dried on their skin. Oil burned their eyes. Some men were badly wounded. Some died quietly. Some slipped under. The survivors tried to organize themselves into groups. They held on to each other. They kicked at anything moving under the surface. They pushed away bodies because the dead attracted predators. And then the sharks came. Not all at once like a monster scene. Not like a single giant fin. More like a slow realization. Something moving below. A shape under the water. A scream from another group. Then silence. The exact number of men killed by sharks is not known. Some survivors saw many attacks. Others saw few or none. That is important, because the popular version makes it sound like the sharks were everywhere, killing man after man for days. The truth is more complicated, and somehow more horrible. The sharks were real, but they were only one part of a much bigger collapse. Thirst, wounds, sun, exhaustion, fear, and the ocean itself.
In
see the first shark for about half an hour. Tiger, 13-footer, you know that when you're in the water, Chief? You tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail.
This is the moment many people first heard the name.
The USS Indianapolis.
Not in a classroom, not in a war documentary, but in Jaws. A fictional shark hunter tells the story in a quiet voice. 3 men in a boat, a dark cabin, a scar on the arm, then the name of a real ship, USS Indianapolis. And for millions of viewers, that became the story. A ship sinks, men go into the water, sharks arrive. But the movie also helped freeze the wrong version in people's minds. In the film, the story suggests the mission was still so secret that no distress signal was sent. That is the part to be careful with. The secret mission had already been completed. The bomb parts had already been delivered. The deeper failure was not simply secrecy. It was that the ship disappeared and the system did not react fast enough. Messages, reports, expectations, and responsibility all failed to line up. So while Jaws gave the tragedy a voice, it also made one part too simple. It turned a complicated human disaster into a shark legend. And once a legend is that strong, it can swallow the real story. By the second day, the men were no longer just waiting. They were breaking. Some began to drink seawater, and that is one of the cruelest traps in the open ocean. When you swallow seawater, it does not really help the thirst. It makes it worse. The salt pulls water out of the body, your mouth gets drier, your mind starts to slip, your heart works harder, and after a while, it can become almost impossible to think clearly. But try to imagine saying no to it. You're being tossed back and forth in the open Pacific. The sun is burning your face, salt is drying on your lips, your throat feels like sand. There is water everywhere, but none of it can save you. That is what made it so hard to understand from the outside. The thing surrounding them was also the thing slowly killing them. Men began to hallucinate. Some thought they saw land. Some thought the ship was just below them. Some believed they could swim down to the galley and find food. A few tried. They never came back. Think about it. The slow damage of time. The sun during the day. The cold at night. The life jackets rubbing skin raw. The smell of oil. The screaming. The sound of men calling out for people who were already gone. And in the middle of all this, there were small acts of leadership. Men trying to keep groups together. Men warning others not to drink seawater. Men pushing away the dead, not because they were heartless, but because the living were still trying to survive. That is the real story of the Indianapolis. Not just men being hunted, men trying to remain human, while everything around them was taking that away. On August 2nd, a Navy plane was flying a routine patrol. The crew was not searching for survivors from the Indianapolis. They were just flying over the ocean. Then one of them looked down. At first, what he saw did not make sense. Oil, debris, small shapes in the water. Then he realized those were men, not a few men. Groups of men, scattered across the sea. A rescue message went out. A seaplane was sent. The pilot, Lieutenant Adrian Marks, saw the condition of the survivors and made a choice. Open ocean landings were dangerous. They could destroy the aircraft. But leaving men in the water meant more would die, so he landed. He pulled men into the plane. When there was no room left inside, some were tied to the wings. Later, ships arrived through the night. For the men still alive, rescue did not feel heroic at first. It felt unreal. Hands pulling them up, voices above them, a deck under their bodies. After 4 days and 5 nights, the ocean finally let some of them go. Of the 1,195 men aboard the USS Indianapolis, only 316 survived. 879 were gone. But the story did not end with rescue. The Navy needed someone to blame. Captain Charles McVeigh had survived the sinking. His own crew largely supported him. But McVeigh was court-martialed. He was found guilty of failing to zigzag. Zigzagging meant steering the ship in an irregular pattern instead of sailing in a straight line. The idea was simple. A submarine needed to predict where the ship would be when the torpedo arrived. If the ship kept changing direction, that prediction became harder. But in McVeigh's case, even the Japanese submarine commander later said it probably would not have changed the outcome. For years he carried that judgment. He also received letters from grieving families who blamed him for their sons' deaths. Imagine surviving the ocean, surviving the sharks, surviving 4 days of thirst and terror, only to spend the rest of your life being told it was your fault. In 1968, McVeigh took his own life. Decades later, survivors and supporters fought to clear his name. Congress passed a resolution in 2000. The Navy later added language to his record, affirming his lack of culpability. But McVeigh never lived to see it. The ship sank in 12 minutes, but the blame lasted for decades.